Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. Well, I said I wouldn't comment on Slapgate anymore unless something significant happened, and I know a couple of things significant have occurred, and I haven't so much as tweeted about it because I really have nothing but disdain for black celebrities. I gotta be serious with you about that one. Yes, there are angles to all of this that are quite relevant to black society, but when I think about these self-centered opportunists who the white media has given jobs or TV shows to or whatever, I quickly find that I get very depressed at the prospect of talking about them. So that's why you haven't seen me saying anything, but there are some lessons to be taken away from this nonetheless, and we do need to discuss it. Now, first off, Will Smith is not what's important here. A lot of folks get tunnel vision about these things, and we shouldn't. I'm not here to cheer for Will Smith or to attack him for that matter. Nor am I here to cheer for or attack Chris Rock or even Jada Pinkett, believe it or not. Will Smith has been banned from the Oscars and any other Academy events for the next 10 years. Now, while it's entirely possible that this can and probably will be quietly rescinded in the next few years, that doesn't erase the fact that this is the first time the Academy has done this, and the public will certainly never forget that. When it comes to setting these punishment precedents, they love to make sure there's a black person they can point to and say, the first time we ever felt the need to do this is because these niggers over here are out of control. This entire fiasco is an object lesson playing itself out. What we're seeing is a microcosm of how white power controls its Negroes. Now, for years, you've had people who have been pontificating about and talking about the dark side of celebrity and Hollywood and such, and one of the phrases that gets kicked around a lot is so-called humiliation rituals. And in a manner of speaking, that's what this has turned out to be. White supremacy is at war with black people. All of us, including the Negroes who it makes rich and famous. The lesson to be learned here is that victory and defeat are all a matter of timing. Remember when that troll or whomever called himself kissing Will Smith and Will Smith slapped him? This was a white guy who did that. The white media tried to call that clown a reporter, but nobody else did. Smith slapped him and there was nothing the punk could do. He put his hands on Smith and he invited whatever the response was. See, Will Smith kept his cool under that circumstance, and not only did he slap a white man with impunity, but he was praised by the public for it. Now, that was a case of defending one's honor. As for the Oscars, I and others have already said what needed to be done in that event. No matter what you think of Chris Rock, Will Smith is a superstar. Chris Rock is not. They're not on the same level. The Oscars was meant to be Will Smith's coronation, at least that's what he definitely could have made it into. He was going to become royalty that night. Not because of approbation from white power, but because with that Oscar, he could lay claim to something that nobody else had ever done. He'd climb to the top of the music world, to the top of the television world, and the movie world. You can't think of anyone, not even Tom Cruise, Brad Pitt, or whomever, whatever white celebrity you want, who can claim to have achieved what Will Smith has. 3 separate mediums, and he became number 1 in all of them. In terms of fame, Chris Rock is a clown. Will Smith is a, prince. And it makes no sense for the king to get into fisticuffs with the court jester. At least, not publicly. You see where I'm going with this? There's a way to do things and a way not to do things. Even if you want to personalize this to Will Smith and Chris Rock, it's still dangerous to take a fool and get into a beef with them. It elevates the fool and it brings you down to their level. Now, while I don't approve of Will Smith deciding to slap Chris Rock publicly or not, nothing that happened that night rose to that level and we all know it. Nonetheless, if someone is so insecure that they feel they simply have to put paws on Chris Rock, there's a way to do things and a way not to, including if you got to go ahead and lay hands on somebody. Publicly, in front of the world, that is not the way to do it. And then to follow up that asinine display with an unhinged, profane tirade that made Will Smith look like he'd lost his mind. It had exactly the opposite effect of what it was that he or his boosters who were sticking up for him would have wanted. Now, why couldn't Will Smith stop himself? Will Smith doesn't care about prestige. Maybe he used to, but he clearly doesn't anymore. And by doing so, he's forgotten what's brought him to the dance. At the risk of sounding like one of those low IQ, pot-smoking, dusty wannabe scholars out there who can barely form a coherent sentence, I think it would be very helpful for us to define terms in this case. Prestige. What does that word mean? No, I don't mean the dictionary definition. I mean its etymological roots. The word prestige comes from the Latin prestigii, which means conjuring or tricks. That's what the word prestige originated from. It meant conjuring or tricks. Later on, the Latin came to mean illusion. Now, perhaps you've seen the Christopher Nolan movie, The Prestige. It had Christian Bale and Hugh Jackman as dueling magicians trying to one-up each other to see who could come up with the most incredible death-defying illusion. As Michael Caine's narration says at the beginning of the movie, the moment when a magician completes the magic trick and the audience stands in awe, that's called the prestige. And that's why Christopher Nolan called the movie that. Because it's not real. That's important here because this is what you need to keep in mind about power. In many cases, it's not what the person or the organization is truly worth. That's called esteem, by the way. It's important because a huge part of how any institution commands respect is based on prestige. And before you go thinking this is Professor Truth being all esoteric with this doesn't mean very much. No, it means a lot. I've told you before about how the white media uses the term soft power when talking about the United States. What they mean is the United States doesn't have enough money, manpower, or national will to always send in the Marines all the time. Not every situation needs that, and the U.S. doesn't have enough resources, doesn't have enough public support, doesn't have enough unhinged lunatics to go out there and blow everything up for them. So how do you avoid getting into fights all the time? You need soft power. And soft power means prestige. That's the reason why the uprisings of 2020 were so devastating to the United States image and its ability to be able to use soft power. How do you get the rest of the world to toe the line without having to put a gun to their heads? Well, you got to convince them that they believe somehow you are in the right. You got to convince them that somehow you're the good guy here. And how do you do that? Prestige. But of course, it's not real. Just like these universities, how do you think it is that Harvard and Yale came to have endowments in the tens of billions of dollars? The richest people alive didn't graduate from those schools. Definitely not the smartest people alive. And yet people will pay a fortune just to get into those schools because they're prestigious. Even Hollywood's harshest critics understand this principle. Hollywood's not doing anything that you or I can't do. Hell, in China, they're now rivaling Hollywood. But why is Hollywood held in higher esteem? Because a long time ago, they figured out they had to treat their industry like a big deal. Even the people who hate the Academy Awards are angry as hell that they can't get one. Steve Bannon tried his incompetent hand at being a filmmaker. I mean Ben Shapiro. He's also making some putrid dreck that he calls movies, but nobody else does. Those two clowns and Fox News, they attack Hollywood all day, every day. They attack the Oscars as being irrelevant, nobody watches it, who cares, etc. Now, do you seriously believe that if the Academy were to give Bannon or Shapiro's asinine flicks an Academy Award, that either of those two clowns would turn it down? You think they wouldn't be bragging that they were Academy Award winners so-and-so from then on? Hell, right Wingnuts, they brag whenever they get their hands on a Pulitzer Prize. You know what the hell they would be saying if they could get their hands on an Academy Award. People like John Milius, he's still whining now because apparently he hasn't been in Academy Award contention since forever. So when they tell you they don't care, that's a lie. They care a lot. And why is that? Their problem isn't with the Hollywood Club, it's with the fact that they can't get into it. Power is not inclusive, it's exclusive. And what makes an Oscar valuable? It's prestigious, but prestige is an illusion and it must be carefully crafted and carefully guarded. You have to act like something is a big deal if you want other people to believe it's a big deal too. An Oscar is important because the Academy treats it like it's important. They put resources behind it so that they can prop up the idea that this is something of consequence and substance. It's not just some hunk of metal they give to some predetermined chumps. They take their high-profile stars, they put them all in the same room, and they have everyone dressed like they're going to a presidential ball. Sure, it's just overpaid actors, directors, and such giving each other awards, but because of how they themselves treat it, they create the illusion of importance, of value. And that's called prestige. To take an illusion and have people actually think that it's got some sort of real value to it. And when people buy into prestige, it becomes power. But that only works so long as the people creating the prestige don't do anything to undermine it. The black church and the so-called black academics, those are textbook examples of two groups who threw away their prestige. My problem with Will Smith's reaction was the fact that he didn't realize or care about the power that he had, not just as it related to Chris Rock, but also with Jada Pinkett. Will Smith's the only one in that entire three-way who actually mattered. The other was a comedian who, truth be told, his best days are behind him, and the other one is a woman who never had her best days in front of her to begin with. Instead of calling that Slapgate, I think I'm going to start calling it Simpgate, because that's what it is. Simping and emotionalism go hand in hand, because simps are emotionally starved and trying to get someone to feed their anemic little souls. You saw Will Smith screaming like a lunatic. That's somebody trying to get attention like a baby crying for a cookie. A man doesn't have to scream and yell like he's got menstrual cramps. Any man who you hear hooping and hollering all the time has a serious manhood deficiency. And because he's hormonal, and he clearly recognizes that nobody sees him as a man, or at least he doesn't feel like they do, he screams and yells. He gives a feminine reaction. See, Will's problem is that for whatever reason he decided that he's going to be making Jada Pinkett the center of his world. I'm not sure why. Maybe she reminds him of his very first girlfriend. Maybe there's some sort of hocus pocus going on. Who knows? But whatever the reason is, obviously it came from a malformed place. And we're seeing the results of that. Will Smith's problem, like a lot of simps, these 6 and 7 and 8 and 9-figure simps, these guys think to themselves that if they just go ahead and present their wallet to whatever female, that's going to make it where she's going to respect them, and it usually backfires. You know what the simp reminds me of? That old story about George Bernard Shaw. Many of you are probably familiar with this one. I'm going to change the genders so you can see how simp logic makes them easy marks to be made fools of. A simp comes up to a woman at a social gathering. He's jingling his car keys in one hand and holding out his billfold in the other. The woman asks him if he would let her drive his car, give her a vacation in the south of France, a Prada bag, and a pair of diamond earrings if she had sex with him for 6 months. The simp, feeling very pleased with himself, says, "Of course." The woman then says, "Would you give me a new car, 6 vacations anywhere I want, half your bank account in your house if I had sex with you for a year?" The simp frowns and says, "Of course not. What do you think I am, a sucker?" The woman replies, "You've already established that principle. Now we're just haggling over the price." You see, that's the reality. That's why Will Smith lost it. And he's not alone. That's why this scenario keeps playing itself out the same way. That's what all these simps, rich or not, even the white ones, Mel Gibson, Donald Sterling, these guys, they all have some sort of meltdown, and it always ends the same way because that's the only way this can possibly end. Simps are always trying to dress up their simping in some sort of valorous sounding language, and it never works. If you're to be taken seriously, what you do is you present your knowledge and your character to someone. Anyone who wants your resources, well, that's got to be earned. Because when you decide that you're going to be giving Jada Pinkett whatever the hell she wants, and you're going to be putting her on the red carpet, and you're going to be elevating her beyond her actual abilities or worth, well, what happens is there's going to be an immediate loss of respect. The same thing that happens whenever you go up to anybody and make it where they don't have to earn access to whatever resources you got. You got to take a hard line on that. For a lot of people, especially for men, that's scary. Will Smith's scared to take a hard line on these things, but it's just a fact. I've been saying this for over a decade, and it applies to all arenas of life. There's no exceptions. Your ballot can be a whorehouse. Anybody can get access to that. But your wallet, on the other hand, that better be like a convent. Only the pure of heart can get in, and they have to be vetted and prove themselves before they're given any kind of access. You don't offer entry to a convent. It has to be earned. You would never use entry to a convent as leverage for a negotiation. A convent is too important for that. The function that it serves and who it serves is too important for it to be allowed to become some sort of bargaining chip. Now, this bit of common sense, this went right over Will Smith's head. Like all simps, Will Smith suffers from a fundamental insecurity. Jada Pinkett saw that, she honed in on it, and she's been exploiting it ever since. He's got the upper hand across the board, but you couldn't tell by looking. If a simp is lucky, then what happens is she takes him to the cleaners, getting him to buy her stuff that he shouldn't, or she takes him to cleaners in court. But if the simp is not so lucky, then he gets a case put on him. Lots of simps have wound up arrested or doing time when they finally lost their patience with a woman who they've been spending all that money and time on when they realize they've been played for a fool. Or they do something stupid because this individual who they really shouldn't have been wasting time with anyway, they do something stupid on that person's behalf because unfortunately that's what happens when you run with that kind of crowd. You see, Will Smith almost wound up getting himself a mugshot that night. It was only because Chris Rock refused to press charges that he didn't get arrested. Now, if he had been arrested, then his career would be over now, before the LAPD even made the mugshot public. The video of Will Smith being handcuffed and led out of the Dolby Theater wearing his Oscar tux and being put into a squad car, why, that would have been the single most sensational video the white media has had since 9/11. The cameras of the world were on the Oscars that night. All of the cameras. They wanted to see if Chris Rock was going to have Smith arrested. But Chris Rock didn't. Not because he couldn't, but because Chris Rock, even with his admittedly deficient and I would say even defective view of blackness, he still managed to have enough sense not to want to give the white media that kind of optics. And look, we've all got our issues with Chris Rock and a lot of his comedy over the years. Every time I think about Chris Rock, I also think about how Ricky Gervais and Louis C.K. and Jerry Seinfeld and Chris Rock, they were all having a roundtable discussion. You remember, both Louis C.K. and Ricky Gervais were spouting off the word nigger and laughing about it. And Chris Rock, he was just sitting there chuckling along with them and even defending them afterwards, defending Louis C.K., saying something stupid to the effect of why Louis C.K. is the blackest non-black comedian I can... Oh man, talk about just degrading yourself. When I think about Chris Rock, that's one of the main things that comes to my mind first, because to me that's front of mind for me, for obvious reasons. Anti-black racism happens to be something that I light up and make sure that people know about it whenever I see it, and this was a blatant example of anti-black racism, and Chris Rock apparently was trying to laugh it off, if not laugh with it. That's not the kind of thing that any black man should be doing, but Chris Rock did it anyway. I would say that I lost a lot of respect for him, but truth be told, I'd never really had any respect for him to begin with. These black celebrities, this goes with the job description. They all have some incident where they had a white person, or a few of them, who were being openly racist, and they don't do anything about it. So while I am disgusted at Chris Rock's lack of nerve, I'm certainly not surprised. And I bring Gervais up because I want to remind everyone, this is the same guy who said that if he had been hosting the Oscars that night, he wouldn't have joked about Jada's hair, he would have joked about her boyfriend. Oh yeah, he'd have gone straight for the jugular on that one. And if Will Smith had come on that stage and slapped Ricky Gervais, you better believe he would have pressed charges. He would have sued Will Smith the whole 9 yards. By the way, Gervais, he's still going in on Will Smith. He's got some choice words regarding Smith being banned from the Oscars for 10 years. Quote, hopefully he'll only do 6 years with good behavior. I guess for Gervais, that's what qualifies as a joke. But the most important aspect of all this to remember is, Jada Pinkett's not the one who risked doing jail time. Will Smith did. Now with him banned from the Oscars and all other AMPAS events, that means Jada Pinkett's banned too. Hell, the only reason anyone even knew her name is because of him. Only reason that she was even going to those events is because of him. You think she'd have a SAG card today if she wasn't married to Will Smith? She's been low-key trying to distance herself from what she prompted him to do, by the way. Now, obviously, the piling on of Will Smith and trying to make this as if he shot Chris Rock live on stage, all of this egregious overreacting and all of this hyperbole, we know this is what the white media does and it's to be expected. But the problem happens to be Will Smith is supposed to know this too. And there are some people trying to act as if it's unreasonable to expect Will Smith to know that. He's been the doggone game of media for 35 some odd years, longer than that actually. If anyone has no excuse for not knowing the ropes by now, it's him. Now, Will Smith, according to some, he's still angry about jokes that Chris Rock had told in the past. Well, let me tell you something. A boss doesn't beef. He teaches. Somebody needs to be straightened out. He makes sure it gets done, but not in a way that harms himself. And the thing about it is, he's the one who's bearing all of this. He's the one whose name is going to be associated with this. He's 53 years old. Let's be bluntly honest. He's got more days in the business behind him than in front of him. What the white media is trying to do now is to destroy Will Smith's prestige. Will Smith is not the smartest rapper who's ever been. He definitely ain't the best actor who's ever been, but what he did do was he was able to take his own work ethic and combine that with his admittedly high amount of charisma, and he was able to create prestige for himself. He was able to create the illusion that, hey, this guy is something special. This guy is something different. Why the hell would anyone endanger that for a run-of-the-mill comedian, truth be told, whose shtick ran out back in the late 90s? If Will Smith did feel like things rose to the level where it needed to get physical, my problem is that he didn't understand when and how to go about doing that. And I think that happens to be the core of where a lot of the discussion and even disagreement among a number of us on this issue might happen to come from. Now, I'm sure that there are a lot of people, of course, who have made it very clear they feel that, well, Will Smith shouldn't have to put up with that. Well, heck yeah, like the white guy who called himself kissing him for whatever reason. You're right, he should not have to put up with that, but understand something. If Will Smith decides, you know what, I ain't giving a pass on this one. I'm not looking the other way on this one. This is something where I'm going to have to give a response to this. Well, how you go about doing that and when you do it, that's the most important thing of all. Because that's what makes the difference between putting pain on someone who disrespected you as opposed to just putting pain on yourself. When you play the game, especially at the high level that Will Smith's been playing it for the last few decades, the rules are different. Of a necessity, they have to be. But there is one rule that's the same regardless of whether you're a globe-dominating superstar like Will Smith, or if you happen to be a largely anonymous guy who's grinding it out day after day. And that rule is, there's a time to check someone and a time to chill. Know the difference. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Stephen Mayfield, Jeffrey Gray, Loke Thies, Helena Edwards, and Rose Arnold. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.